Over 2 years ago, UK citizens voted narrowly in a referendum in favour of leaving the European Union. Today, the future of the UK's relationship with Europe is still anything but clear. The delay and the uncertainty have several causes. Firstly, the referendum itself was ill-conceived in that it offered voters only a simple in-out response, whereas it is now apparent that many would prefer some sort of compromise position where the UK retained some elements of its existing links with the EU if a deal with the Union could be struck. Slow progress in Parliament towards the definition of such a compromise has reflected an age-old hindrance to UK politics, the fact that the two main political parties have always been internally divided over Europe. Such a division is not surprising. The EU question does not sit naturally within the tribal left-right division which has long dominated UK politics. It is necessary, logically, for a true believer of either left or right to favour a particular position on Europe. However, we treat EU membership as though it is essentially a left-right issue when members of Parliament vote as their parties force them to, rather than as they personally believe. All this means that debate about EU membership is badly distorted by party anxiety to maintain party unity in order to hang on to or gain power. This has never been truer than today when a government with a tiny majority struggles to cling on to power. Most of us believe that the single most powerful influence in the government's drafting of its present policy, the Chequers Agreement, was the interests of the governing party rather than those of the country. The consequence is a proposal for presentation to the EU that few expect to be accepted and many would dislike, even if it was. Across our society, there now seems little faith in our leaders' ability to deliver any Brexit outcome that a clear majority of citizens would approve. Well, what about a second referendum? To decide our ultimate destiny, once the issues, the complexities, and the possible consequences are clearer. But can we be sure a further referendum would make matters any clearer than the close result of the 2016 referendum, which gave no clear indication of what those opposing EU membership wanted to see in its place, and what price they might be prepared to pay for it. We do not know, for example, how many would accept that any unemployment caused is a price worth paying for full parliamentary sovereignty. No one was asked, if the country could not gain control of immigration from Europe, except at the cost of your income, what level of reduction would you be happy with? 5%? 10%? No one was asked if they would be content to pay more for the food we import as a price for leaving Europe. And no one was asked, can you see a way of avoiding a hard border with Ireland? The answers to such questions would have been very instructive for formulating Brexit policy and conducting negotiations. Instead, we have had open season for DIY interpretation of the original referendum result in any way that suits your Remainer or Leaver preference. This is then accompanied by repeated helpings of fudge from the policymakers. The EU has been right to see current UK aspirations as having your fudge cake and eating it too. Referendums may be helpful in assessing the public view on a single, limited, clearly defined, practical or moral issue, which lends itself to a simple yes-no choice. This is how referendums have usually been used in a range of countries. But Brexit is anything but simple. It is an issue full of ifs and buts. For most people, it is not essentially a moral issue, rather it is the economic consequences that are the main concern, and these are very complex in terms of how the UK trades and the effect of citizens' freedom of movement between European countries. No one can be sure of the impact of Brexit on the economy and on the relationship between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. There was never a good reason in the first place for holding a referendum on so complex a matter. We know that the EU referendum was devised in 2015 by an unsettled Prime Minister to quieten a troublesome faction in his party rather than to honour a democratic principle. The opposition party at the time, conscious of the way some of its supporters were being fired up about immigration by the new United Kingdom Independence Party, it could not afford to be seen to oppose a referendum. Thus, the two main parties colluded in a strategy designed to protect each party's standing, and thus Parliament effectively abnegated its responsibility for making a difficult and complex decision, delegating it instead to the public. We cannot be sure that a second referendum would be more helpful, nor can we be confident it would be legitimate, given the previous record of misinformation in pre-referendum propaganda and recent revelations about the misuse of official funds, possible foreign funding of campaigns, and dubious use of online canvassing using unauthorised social media data. So, what can be done? Can a general election help, as some suggest? Probably not. The clue is in the word general. It is difficult at the best of times to know voters' motives for the way they vote. Their motives may be many and diverse, unclear and even contradictory. They may vote on personalities, not principles or policies. They often vote on different priorities from those assumed by the parties. It's worth remembering that with the EU referendum on the horizon, a poll of voters in the 2015 general election found that only 6% of them said that EU concerns were their main reason for voting the way they did. Another general election now would also fail to tell us exactly the electorate's view on Brexit alone. Competing interpretations of the election result would only inflame existing divisions, not resolve them. So, is there another way forward? There is an alternative to a general election or a second referendum to resolve the paralysis in the Brexit process. It is to leave Brexit decisions where they should have been all along, in Parliament. But, and it's a big but, Parliament can only be trusted on this issue if members are free to vote on all Brexit matters and decisions as conscience rather than party dictates. We need MPs to stop playing party games and start fulfilling their responsibility for making a decision when the time comes, that represents what each member honestly believes to be in the best long-term interests of the country. We need a parliament-wide commitment to free voting to improve the standard of Brexit debate, as members begin to say what they truly believe, instead of parroting the party scripts imposed by the whips. This change in parliamentary behaviour could do so much to increase public respect for and trust in Parliament as an institution and in its decisions. And if ever there was a time when that respect and that trust was desperately needed, it is right now. However, even with free voting, some MPs could still feel intimidated by pressures and abuse from parties or public at both parliamentary and local levels. If party leaders are to say that their MPs are free to vote as they judge most fit, then voting procedures must reflect that. MPs must not be in danger of being held to account and threatened by party whips or local party members. Therefore, a further and more radical step must be for all parliamentary votes on Brexit, and Brexit alone, to be by secret ballot. The party whips do not need to know how individuals vote, nor, it can be argued, do constituents need to know how their MP voted on a single issue. As a voter, I elect my MP for a raft of reasons. I cannot expect them to vote as I would wish on every single issue that comes before Parliament, especially when that issue does not clearly relate to party principles. And how many constituents take the trouble to check how their MP voted after every vote in Parliament? Extremely few, I suggest. If MPs wished to tell or lie to others about how their conscience led them to vote on Brexit, that should be their choice. However, they should feel no embarrassment about saying that it was a secret ballot for a good reason and I am choosing to keep the secret. In our sort of representative democracy, we vote for individuals, not national parties. That is why we have constituencies and a local poll where we can choose the candidate who we think will best reflect our own values and interests and who will apply personal wisdom and integrity in the way they vote. MPs are expected to represent the interests of all those in their constituencies, whether members of their own party or none. No one has the right to expect their MP to vote they would wish on any single issue, particularly where, as in this case, it does not clearly relate to party principles or policy. Is there any chance of free voting in Parliament? Of course, the idea of MPs voting secretly will appall the usual suspects who believe nothing without precedent or tradition stretching back 100 years or more can have any worth. We must explain to them that we have never been here before and different times need different solutions. We need a radical strategy for a desperate situation. Ordinary voters now understand how much more complicated Brexit is than ever they knew when the 2016 referendum was held. My discussions with them suggest there would be public support for the free vote process I have described. No one knows the complexities and the arguments on all sides better than MPs who've debated the issues for hundreds of hours. Let us now ask them to do their job in a principled way through free voting. It is probably only public pressure that is able to persuade Parliament to adopt the free and secret voting I'm arguing for. But given public enthusiasm for a free parliamentary vote, the parties might warm to the idea. None of the political parties, major or minor, are keen to hold a general election. They're too afraid of losing it. The government has maintained firmly that a second referendum is out of the question, so that agreeing to one would represent a major climb down that would infuriate all those who voted for Brexit in the first referendum. Adopting free parliamentary voting on Brexit could be seen as Parliament doing what it should do anyway, showing leadership in the national interest. Whatever the result of free voting, it will not please everyone. Nothing can do that. But this means of settling the Brexit dilemma could satisfy more citizens and upset fewer than any other means available. Perhaps an organisation with a sense of civic responsibility and the necessary resources could conduct an opinion poll to test public support for the free voting approach. And perhaps you could help encourage support by firstly sharing this video with others, and secondly by visiting my blog and sharing that too. You will find the blog here. Thank you for watching and listening.